Hello, welcome back to Various Fields. I'm Hazen Fields II,
I'm Hazel Fields the third.
I'm Lex.
and we're back with you again. This subject that we're going to bring up today is something that we're going to, deal with a lot of time with. So we're going to kind of forego the our normal thing of finding out how everybody's been doing, but. By the time you're watching this, there'll be several weeks in, and there's a family that we want to send our love and prayers and thoughts of comfort. The Fortson family, the son, 23-year-old Roger Fortsman, was Fortson. Yeah, he was shot in his home. By some sheriffs, and as they're investigating what's going on, it's just a very, very sad time. He's a young African American man. He was a Air Force senior airman. Yeah, and we're not going to go into the facts of or what we've been,
The investigation's ongoing.
Yeah.
Be careful what we say, what we know.
Right, and then if we get any, and basically these are news reports that we're reading and things that we've been seeing. So if we, we apologize if in advance if some of the information that we have are not precise, but a lot of the information that's out there is known at this point. This is,
Right.
This is what we know at this point.
We're just hearing this about like 4 days out at the very least. No,
It's only happened 2 days ago.
yeah, it's about this.
Right.
Well, based on this report, it happened on the 3rd. So
Happened on the 3rd,
yeah, so
okay.
we're about a week out from the incident, right? And by the time this recording gets out, more in the investigation would have already come out.
I think,
So we are very much behind the times as of this being aired.
Right.
I guess for reference, it is what, 10th?
This is the 12th.
12th.
This is the 12th. This is
May 12th.
May 12th, the Mother's
12th.
Day.
And I
Actually, this is that. Yeah, and it's strange enough, it is Mother's Day.
is
Now,
Mother's Day.
and I'll expose part of this.
Yeah,
This
that's
is-
deep.
we're actually you see us in different clothing, but it's really a the second
Different
shoot of
episode, yeah.
another episode. But yeah, so that being Mother's Day, as my son alluded to, it's a very tough thing as a parent to lose a child, and it's very, very heavy. Very, my heart, of course, if you're a parent and you see a young man who's been doing the right thing, a good thing, unfortunately, in this incident, what happened, from what we understand, him coming to the door after the police knocked on the door. There's video of him. The body camera footage shows that he had his service revolver, which he was allowed to have apparently.
I'm referring to Roger Fortson.
Roger Fortson at this point. He comes to answer the door with the gun down, but he was shot 5 or 6 times, I believe. And but anyway, the thing is, from Florida, I understand you're allowed, to own, if you have it properly done. There's things you have, but coming to the door, it brings to mind my son's safety. I worry about you guys, and with anything that happens and traffic stops, and unfortunately, America has been culturally conditioned to have biases as it pertains to African American people, Hispanic people, people of color, and it unfortunately the rules are different, and it's unfair and it's not right. But if you want your children to survive, you almost have to follow those things which are unwritten rules, and it's not it's not right, but it is what it is. And so the topic of freedoms and surviving, is something that comes to mind for me. And this is kind of wanted to bring up. I know when I was, you guys were growing up, I might have done it to ad nauseum, but wanting you to be careful when you drove or in traffic stops and things of that nature, because I think the 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 nature of how this country is, kind of put us, people of color, in a second class citizen mindset. By so now, of course, I'm not speaking of every officer or any person, but systematically, or systemically,
It's woven in.
it's woven, it's baked in.
It's baked in.
And in fact, that was kind of an analogy I wanted to use. Is if I baked you, let's say a lemon cake, and it's baked and it's already prepared, and then you bite into it, you say, well, I really don't like lemon cake. So in order to fix it, I say, well, let me fix it up. And I take a bunch of fudge and chocolate and I pour it on top of it and maybe some whipped cream and some sprinkles. It may taste different, but the lemon flavor
Would still be there.
would still be there, And unfortunately, cultural conditioning, it leaves the residue of racism and biases and bigotry.
Right.
And I'll go back to biases because, there are those who live in this country that are not necessarily, of a different age, you're younger, and they may not be directly in total understanding of the things that precede, that came before them. They may have some knowledge of it, but the biases are baked in, and obviously there's racism and that still exists. So I kind of wanted to talk about, how do we navigate that?
Right. And we have to be, and there's a level of caution when talking about this because, again, we've come from a very particular background. One, particularly because of our heritage, we can speak about this with a particular set of pains that we've gone through already. All right. But I want to also address that there has been a good amount of changes that have happened from the time in which you came from to the time that we are born into now, right? Even though there not have been a great many of different steps, right, that have been taken, right? Because a lot of these pains are still here, right? A lot of these rule sets that kind of keep us like fearful, cautious, are still here. All right. To the point where even like you said, in our be careful of how we drive. It was more than that, right? The way you were raising us, we were cautious of more or less of everything, both of our demeanor, how we carry ourselves on the day to day, right? I don't know how many times these kind of conversations happen in other households, right? In terms of dealing with law enforcement or dealing with like any type of group, right? Because there was not just a fear of being injured, but like being perceived as a danger in society. All right. So
So I guess there's this weird, it's like a two-way street kind of thing. Let me phrase what's the conflict that's in my head right now with what I want to talk about, because I think we first kind of presented, we're talking about freedom and freedoms, and also, I mean, we're all African American men, and not that that's not visually notable on the camera, but I'm saying we're coming from that perspective, right?
Yes.
Because you said like, oh, let's talk about freedoms, but we're talking about freedoms as African American men, not just freedoms in general.
Right.
And then there's also we're saying we're being careful. Like, how do we be careful? And that's interesting because like, when does freedom hit being careful? You know what I mean? Right. So, for instance, there's a way of quote unquote. And this is me as also the youngest member of the family, and also not having a kid, not planning to have kids anytime soon, and things like that. But there is that idea of quote unquote raising your child upright, right? And there's a thing of you want your child to be respectful, you want your child to be live their life and be as good as they possibly can be, and you want your child to have as little problems as possible. Right. But at the same time, you want your child to also be free, right? And then there's that choice I imagine you have to make with us, but also parents across any parent, I would say, but any parent of color and also any parent of like the way that America's essentially caste system works, it puts people in positions of, well, what is raising your child up correctly? Us being respectful to police is a good thing, but us being respectful to police is also a good thing, but that's also because it means it means that we may be, if we aren't, our lives are in danger.
Right.
However, there's also that thing of how much can you raise someone to quote unquote be the correct way when like maybe they're the common thing is people are demonized like rap music or hip hop music. They enjoy that. They have that demeanor, and next thing you know, that's frowned upon. But that's nothing doing anything incorrect. That's just frowned upon incorrectly. So then, do you shy people away from that way of being? Which I'm using the stereotypical. That's what people commonly do with African American men, where they seem threatening. They look a certain way. They do a certain thing. And if the I want to say I want to make sure we say the name, which would be Roger Fortman.
Fortson.
Roger Fortson. As far as we know, at least with right now, he is part of the United States government. He was an airman. He would at least depictionally is that doing everything correct.
Right.
You know?
Right.
And
Right.
even in this, so there's that idea of freedom and then safety. I guess that's the thing I'm trying to figure out. Like, how does one navigate that?
There's always like a general rule of thumb for any, like, you know, like as you said, like I would imagine every single parent would raise their child to be better than they were themselves. Bring them with the wisdoms from their time to say, oh, do this better because not so much I have failed or like these are my failings or anything like that. Here's where I could have done better. I hope to instill these practices in you so that way you can navigate life better than I. But like, mind you, there's always a little bit of a disconnect because times have changed, right? And not to the point where like information comes out a lot more quicker, all right? And there's a lot more spread of information that kind of allows children themselves to kind of like make their own decisions on how to navigate. And it becomes kind of a disconnect between older generation and now, right? And how they best handle themselves today.
The balance of that child's free, or I mean, at this point, the person, but in this case, I guess we're taking the perspective of a parent.
Right. But there's always some subtext that's never written in every textbook, and I'm using that as an allegory.
There is no textbook.
All right. There is no textbook.
Yeah.
Right. But I'm saying there's always a subtext that's always different with every marginalized group in the speaking, right? If the chapter was stay safe, the I guess the bullet points would always be different as to how to be safe.
Indeed.
All right, and I think that's what we're kind of addressing now because no matter what steps that are taken, right, there always seems to be a inch of danger
and then
that we're faced with.
And this is not to put anyone in danger, but also, quote unquote, should you stay safe? And I don't mean going out there and doing things that were obviously going to put you in harm's way, but also the fact that we have to have the conversation of staying safe to these quote unquote unwritten rules are the things that are inherently oppressive in some form or fashion, or can lead to being oppressive in some form or fashion.
Right.
But this part of the sadness is that we even have to have this conversation in the first place. How to navigate freedom. Freedom by definition suggests that you don't have to navigate it. You just kind of walk in it. But of course, the fallacy that we deal with in our community is that if we do everything right, then safety will happen. And that's not true. That has never been true. It doesn't matter, you know, oftentimes. And what I'm saying is en masse, you know, in the bigger picture, the broad brush, there's too many examples, too many historical references of people of color being shot, killed, lynched for you know since this country has been established, and it's, as he said, and it's baked in as so much that it even gets baked into ourselves. You know, as being an African American man, I know that, you know, unfortunately, that I sometimes hate the fact that I have to be careful when my counterparts who are not African American, not in person, they don't have to be. You know, I have to be mindful of things like that. But so now we talk about, as a parent, you want your child to survive. You want your child to live. So there's different, you know, ways of thinking it. Well, do you want your child to be a person that survives and lives and learns how to navigate under levels of oppression, or do you want them to be a freedom fighter and get into what is known as good trouble? So therefore, fight against that. You know, so it's always different. You know, because a parent oftentimes is looking for the safety, and most of the movements for freedom have been fought by young people,
Right.
it so there's that thing of keeping your child safe versus standing up for your rights, and it's very complicated in how we have to operate in this society.
I would argue, not argue, but like it's interesting because I also want to put, because we're putting out this presentation, we're putting out this point of view, but also for at least for I would like to say I think a majority of African American people who grew up or understand, or even people who have immigrated here who now understand and who are Black, understand how America works. I don't think this conversation is new. At least maybe certain different aspects, maybe different texts, but I don't think this conversation is new. So we keep talking about safety or how to be safe. I don't think. And I'm putting this as putting this out there from my perspective, because the difference is how to be safe versus almost from the parent's perspective, how to be safe. And the difference is I don't think one can be safe as a person of color slash, say Black man slash, African American descent in America, because technically you're always constantly under threat by the nature of how America works.
Right.
So I'm kind of putting it out there more on the case of I don't want to give. I guess this is my perspective. I'm not trying to kind of give to the audience or not, but it's like I don't want to give like how to be safe. This is the right way to navigate, because then it's going to be like, oh, we did all the right things, and there is really no right way, because it keeps being proven again and again.
Right.
Those are almost fake rules, but then there is the concern, and this is I'm not sure if it's a question to you per se, but just from the parents' perspective. But there is a preferred way, I'd imagine, or at least because now you're like, but there are ways to protect yourself. It's just I'm not sure if I'm presenting the question correctly, but it's like there's two different thoughts. There's the statement, there is no safe way, I believe, to really operate
Right.
in America as someone who's Black.
Right.
Truly. But there are ways that are considered acceptable, and then there are ways to navigate.
Right, and even in that, there is still a danger.
Yes, because you can't be safe if you're constantly under threat.
Right, exactly. Right. Because, like I said before, like it does pain me to know that, like, even though there are times, like it shows in how we speak. There are moments in time, like I was raised in high school. People were like, "Oh, you don't sound like a Black person.
You sound white.
You sound white. You sound right." And it's what you were raised with, right? But like even still, it was part of our teachings to speak this way because it was less threatening.
Yeah.
Right. Well, not even just for the sake of the educational aspect, but you always taught us to be educated, right? Or in the way we present ourselves, so make sure that we come off as if we know how to present ourselves in any situation, right? But in part of this, right, there was there's a divide, right, in how we ought be like how we ought act. All right, to both communities. All right. And I also find that interesting that even in understanding that, we have to put on a certain voice in speaking to authorities, all right, and speaking to people that might find us. Because it's not even just about being perceived dangerous. It's we always also seem to be presumed dangerous. Too. It's like there's always a default. It's like we're never asked like, is everything all right here? It's always what's going on. Well,
Well, I want to go back one step because I don't think that we ever raised with the intention of saying, well, we want you to sound this way. It was always in reference to presenting yourself. And being heard, and your presentation is I grew up in a time of we're products of our environment. My father was the same way, elocution and how to communicate a thought, an idea. My father was very big on utilizing your mind in reference to de-escalate things, and so part of that is communication skills and being able to articulate a thought, but not necessarily with the concept of I want you to sound a particular way, because you can't assign a race or ethnicity.
No, I agree
to the thing. And I'm not saying I just want to make that clear for the audience.
It's one of those things where there is no I'd almost argue there's no quote unquote right way to be in certain aspects. You know, I don't mean like obviously there's things that you can do that are wrong as individuals to yourself as individually, but in terms of how you speak, there's no right way to speak. You should be able to communicate as you will. Yeah. However, if you're talking to an officer or someone else of the law, or the case is policeman, something like that, there's a difference in how they will perceive someone who says, "Hi, sir. Hey, how's it going? How whatever," versus someone saying, "Hey, yo." You know,
right?
And that's not a big deal. It's not a big deal, but from that perspective, someone will make that judgment.
Right. It's naturally instilled within us all to understand that this is how you ought approach someone of a brass or some type of to a degree, yes. But like people automatically make that switch, right? People that are aware of it. Like I think it was what movie came out on Netflix? It was I'm trying to remember. They all turned into horses at the end of the day.
They all turned into horses.
Do you remember what it was?
It's called Sorry to Bother You.
Sorry to bother. Yeah. But the very fact that that's even part of the. You never seen it?
I think you love it. Yeah. So sorry.
Right. There was the discussion of the white voice, if you will, that was utilized on what you call it, like in a telemarketer's room, right? To say like, if you sound more like this, you would get more sales.
Well, you know, I don't want to, I will make a quick jump to a different thing, but also use this as a transition because I don't want to harp on the one thing with just about voice. Because just for the audience wise, we're not saying talk a certain way, and that's how you say that is not.
No, not even close. No.
But it's funny because my name is Lexington, which isn't, which I think people sometimes perceive or can sound white to people. And I feel like I've walked into rooms and I've gotten jobs and you can see people be like, oh. I think they feel tricked over the phone.
Right.
I walk in and it's like, oh, you're the one.
Right. There are many times when I was talking to people and he's like, oh, you're Hayes. I'm like, yeah.
So shuffling the paper.
Who do you think I was?
But these are realities that you have to deal with as an African American male, and that's so sad. I remember growing up. And, you know, being a child in the Jacob Riis Projects is Lower East Side. And I'm jumping back and forth. I'm going to jump to a movie that was called, I don't want to say Coolie High. Oh, my gosh. Cornbread Earl and Me. The movie. So I'm going to put that.
Oh, you showed this to me.
Yeah. Cornbread Earl and Me was a movie, ultimately an African-American young man who's a basketball player on the up and coming. Was shot and killed as always, and you know, because he was running, he had I think he had an orange soda or something in his hand, but he was mistaken by police to be somebody else, and he was shot and killed. Now, mind you, and this has been happening forever. Before you guys, we have all the cell phones. So the only reason why that movie is produced is because there was so much evidence of this happening in the community. So it wasn't, you know, you had to get documents to make a movie like this, and you know, you didn't have film, someone with a camera showing it. So it was enough evidence to say we need to make a movie about this kind of thing going on.
That's interesting. I'm gonna keep that for later.
But growing up, going back to that, my mother, being a good mother, my father would tell me this. Now, mind you, a child's inclination is to just break off and run. Trust me, when you get in your 60s, you don't just break off and run. You know, you make big decisions before you do that. But a child would do that. But my mother would say, when you are going to the store and you're carrying a bag, do not run.
Yeah,
I remember that.
You know, so you don't. So you as a child had to change what would have been in your inner system for safety, because you didn't want, because that was the thing, you didn't want to be mistaken for someone. So a black child running in the street was perceived to be suspicion of something.
Right. It was enough for that.
It was enough. And these are the things. Now, mind you, from being at my age, born in 1963, I have memories of my father and mother's stories, which you guys would not have, and realities of the civil rights movement growing up. And I went to a predominantly white school called Grace Church School when I was growing up, you know, during the time where, you know, black people were now integrating more and more into these types of schools. And, you know, it was supposed to be considered a privilege, but it was a lot of stressfulness to some degrees going through it. You know, it was an experience I'm glad I had, But as a child, you were faced with a lot of biases, that existed, even though it was what do they call 'em? Microaggressions and
right.
things of that nature. But these are things are real. So America, we're those who are watching this, we just want to let you know that when you hear your coworkers who happen to be African American and Spanish or Native American, and we say that there is an innate difference of how, because this conversation in and of itself speaks of our rights being more considerations. If you think about the Constitution was written and freedoms are written down for, and it's not me being biased, it's just rich white landowners were those who were the first partakers of this large slice of the pie. Those who are African American, brown people, we kind of got the amendments. Would kind of mean to me, it's almost like a, oh yeah, oh, okay, I can see that. Later on, so later on, or even begrudgingly. All right, here's something for you.
Land of the free was to slaves at the time.
Dig it, yeah. So even and even that, even the national anthem. If you go into the third verse, and anyway, we're 3 minutes in, but we get 3 minutes out before we have to end. Thank you, Nels, for that.
Just real quick, just because we're also talking about like this, I guess, this ongoing narrative that if it wasn't an issue, it wouldn't need to be talked about as often as it does, but it always seems to be the prevailing narrative nevertheless, to the point where we even have a movie about it just came out just recently called American Fiction.
Right.
And it kind of speaks about that meta narrative as well, like of how it is perceived in media, or how we are perceived in media and how we are expected to be portrayed, right? And it's a wonderful movie, right? But like the very fact that those who have not seen the movie, please go watch it, right? It does bring about a lot of the deeper points that we are trying to talk about here, even though, again, we brought up the Fortsons and their grief, right? But nevertheless, like all of that kind of like is boiled down into that one narrative and like how we are perceived and how we are constantly talking about it, how it is. People sometimes even say like, why are we always bringing this up? It's always on the news. Why does it need to be brought up again? It's old hat, right? But the very fact that it is constantly echoed out there, nevertheless, right, proves that there's a need for a change.
Well, those who are bringing the conversation to the table, we appreciate you. People like Barbara Howard, when she does her story time, she brings up a lot of books that most of her books are showing African American kids in it and things of that nature, so that we're changing the narrative slowly, or at least bringing the conversation to the table. America, this is some of the residual effects of the original sin. And we, in the conversation, the table is open and we have to have the conversation. And it's unfortunate that it feels like it's always happening, but it's always happening. So
we always have to talk about it. So, and this is for everyone, support your friends, support your friends who are of color, of people who are of color, support each other. One of those things. I'm just putting one of those things because there is no finite point to this conversation. But if it's going to take anything away from this episode in particular, these things happen. Don't shy away from them. And the best way to help is just at the very least, when you talk about it, more people understand. And you have to believe, you have to understand these things aren't fake. These things aren't not happening. It's not being over exaggerated. So just listen, support, and love.
This has been Various Fields. We've been talking about various freedoms. Please like, subscribe. Hit all the buttons.
Hit all the buttons.
And we hope to see you next time. And this discussion is important, and you're important too.
We love you.
We love you.
Love you, boys.
Love you too.